Hi students, welcome to our third video, and this is we are going to discuss about experiment 2, that is test for fats. Test for fats. I already told you while writing experiments what all you have to do. Aim, material required, procedure, result or observation. You are supposed to write all these things before you write and you test any experiment. So test for fats. In where you will find these fats, I have already told you fats are present in oily substance more, like chips, like your cheesy things, like all these things, like ghee, sweets and all. You will have more and more fat in that. Oil content will be more, ghee content will be more, in that fats will be there. Fats are very very important to us. We saw in maximum in all those things fats will be there, like our milk powder, like our hide and seek what we serve, and yippee noodles, all we have fats. So how to test these fats? Let's see how to test these fats. So for testing these fats, where what you will have, what I said, more fatty substance. So to test the fats, you need to add what? Aim. First you need to write aim. So here key, what you need for testing for starch, you need iodine solution, isn't it? Here nothing you need. At your home also you can do it. What you have to do for this? We will see. Aim. First is aim. For rating aim. What is the aim? To test fats. Fats in food item. Fats in food item. Actually, to test the fats, we don't take rice and all. As you know, it does not contain any oil, so that you don't contain fat also. Okay, it's useless to take rice. So you take something like which contains oil and ghee more. So procedure. Sorry, materials required next. Materials required. What all you need in these? You need very simple materials you required in this, and those let's take potato chips already. Sweet, any sweet you take. Sweet we'll take to test whether it contains fat or not. And second one, paper you are supposed to take, and that's it. Sweet and a paper. Next, a sweet or a chips or your cheesy things, whatever you can take, you can take. Next, procedure. Take a white paper. Take a white paper. Next, put sweet on it. Sweet or any cheesy item, or which contains oil, like chips, on it. Rub this food item on paper. Food item on paper. Next, aim, it is required, procedure completed, right? What you will observe? Observation. After rubbing, paper becomes translucent. What do you mean by translucent, children? So translucent is the object which allows partially light to pass through it. Isn't it? It does not allow totally, but it allows partially to pass through it. And result. what the result shows, the transparent papers, the food item contains oil in it. Fat in it. So, when you see a paper, isn't it? It is not transparent paper. So, to test whether the food item contains fat or not is very easy. Take one paper and put or rub on that the food item, whatever you want to test whether it contains fats or not. If that paper becomes transparent, means you can see other object not clearly, partially, then you can say that yes, it contains fat in that food item. Simple. If you apply oil to the paper, what it becomes transparent, isn't it? Like that, any food item which contains fat will make the paper to turn into transparent. Turning the paper into transparent is very important here. Important point to remember is turning paper into transparent. If the paper turns into transparent, you can easily say that yes, that food item which you are testing has a what? Fat in it. Fat in it. Got it? So very easy, isn't it? When compared to the carbohydrates and proteins, next you are going to get this fat is very easy. Just take a paper, rub it on the food item whatever you want to test, and when you rub it, if the paper becomes transparent, your paper turns into transparent, you can say that yes, the food item contains fat in it. Okay, I hope you are very clear. Here to remember is only the paper and any food item is enough, and transparent is an important word you have to use in that. Yes, keywords are those. If those that are there in the exam, teacher will easily give you the mark. Got it? And during the experiment, as these experiments will have some diagrams, if you draw the diagrams and exhibit them, the diagrams will speak more than your explanation. So easily you are going to get your marks. I hope you are done with this. And next, test for proteins. Test for proteins. To test proteins, you have somewhat big procedure. We will go into it. Next one is test for proteins. Proteins are also mainly found, isn't it? Mainly carbohydrates, fats and proteins are found in the food items. So to test the proteins, you need to do one thing. You need to prepare, you need to take what? Before writing A in procedure and all, I want to tell you one thing. See, this is very important. Test for proteins. To test proteins, you need 2% of, what is that? 2% of copper sulfate. 10% of sodium hydroxide. So what all you need? 2% of copper sulfate and 10% of sodium hydroxide. 2% of copper sulfate and 10%. See, the copper sulfate will be formed in a form of crystals and sodium hydroxide also. See, I'll read out one. See, preparation of 2% of copper sulfate solution and 10% of sodium hydroxide solution. So, what you need to prepare copper sulfate, 2% of copper sulfate and 10% of sodium hydroxide. You need to prepare these two first. These are not readily made. So, to make these two, first what you want? 2% of copper sulfate. What you need? 2% of copper sulfate solution you have to make. So, to make these solutions, you need to follow something. I'll tell you. Please note down very carefully. First, you will go with 2% of copper sulfate. Copper sulfate will be in blue in color. Actually, they are in a form of a crystals like your salt and sugar. So 2% of copper, to make 2% of copper sulfate. Remember, to make 2% of copper sulfate, to make 2% of copper sulfate, what all you need? You need 2 grams of copper sulfate plus 100 grams of water. 100 grams of water. So take one test tube, add 2 grams of copper sulfate in it. It will be in blue color, na? We will do with blue. Copper sulfate taken, copper sulfate taken plus 100 grams of water you need to add. What you need to add? Water you need to add. Water. 100 grams. So 2 grams of copper sulfate plus 100 grams of water will give you 2% of copper sulfate solution. 2% of copper sulfate solution. Solution is nothing but which is in a watery form, you can say liquid form. Okay, so 2 grams to prepare 2% of copper sulfate solution, you need 2 grams of copper sulfate plus 100 grams of water. So to make 2%, so 2 grams of copper sulfate added, 100 grams of water added to make a solution, 2% of copper sulfate solution. Why you are making this? To test proteins, in the food item. And next, you need to prepare 10% of sodium hydroxide. 10% of, second thing what you have to do is, you need to prepare 10% of sodium hydroxide. How to prepare this 10% of sodium hydroxide? Is, see, take 10 grams of sodium hydroxide, in a test tube, take 10 grams of sodium hydroxide. To that, you add NaOH is nothing but sodium hydroxide. In that you add 100 grams of water. So 100 milliliters of water, not grams. Here also there is small change. 100 milliliters of water, not grams. 100 milliliters of water. So what it becomes? It becomes water into it. You add water into it. So it becomes 10% of sodium hydroxide. 10% of sodium hydroxide. To get 10% of sodium hydroxide, you need to add 10 grams of sodium hydroxide plus 100 ml of water. There also 100 ml of water plus 2 grams of copper sulfate will give you 2% of copper sulfate. Here 10% of sodium hydroxide. 10% of sodium hydroxide. So these are the two solutions you need to prepare very well in to test proteins. Then this is prepared, isn't it? This is prepared. Now, after preparing this, take any food item. Take any, see here it is given. If the substance you wish to test is a solid, grind it into a powder or a paste. Add a little of it in the test tube and add 10 drops of water to the powder and stir it well. Then add 10 drops of this solution in a clean test tube. So you have made, na? So after making this, to take 10% of sodium hydroxide solution and 10 grams you have made, isn't it? For this, what you need 2% of copper sulfate and 10% of sodium hydroxide. So aim. To test food item. To test proteins in food item. Food item. Next. Material required. What are the materials required? It required 10% of sodium hydroxide, 2% of copper sulfate, and the food item whatever you like. Food item, make it into paste. It is a solid. If it is a solid, make it into paste. Grind it and make it, add water in that. Into paste. Grind and add. And next, any food item. Okay, here we will write, in the procedure we will write this. Here we will write any food item. Suppose like curd we will take. Curd, egg we will take. And next, test tube. You require what? Test tube. And what all we will take, that's all. It's enough. Next, procedure. If it is solid, if it is a solid food item, like your whatever you say, like biscuit you want to test, you have to grind it, add water into it, then it becomes paste, and stir it well, it becomes paste. Then you do it. If it is a curd, no problem. Curd directly you can do it. We will take curd in this. Okay, first take 2% of in a test tube. In a test tube, what you are going to take? Add 10 drops of this solution in a clean test tube. Add 2 drops of copper sulfate solution, 10 drops of sodium hydroxide. Take a test tube. Add, I am taking curd as an example. Curd to it. And to this, add 2 drops of copper sulfate and 10 drops of 2 drops of copper sulfate and 10 drops of sodium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide. Then fourth, take a test tube, add curd to it, add 2 drops of copper sulfate solution with a dropper you need to add, and 10 drops of sodium hydroxide solution. 2 drops of here curd, add curd, add 2 drops of copper sulfate solution, copper sulfate solution. If it is a solid, if you want to test a biscuit, you have to grind it, you have to add water, and you need to stir it, and you can add. And next, plus 10 drops of sodium hydroxide, NaOH, I'll write. NaOH is nothing but sodium hydroxide. So, plus add this, plus this. You have added all these things. And if added, completed, right? Then, that's all. And stir it well. And stir it well. You need to stir it well, okay? And shake well. Shake well. If it turns into violet or purple, if this solution turns into result, as we have added curd, it contains proteins in that. It turned into violet. Or purple also, it's okay. Purple. Observation. Hence proved that curd contains proteins in it. Proteins in it. Got it? This is the thing you need to do it. So whatever the food item, if it contains proteins in it, it is going to turn into purple or violet. Purple or violet. Any food item you take. If it does not turn into purple or white, like rice you take. If it does not turn into purple or white, it means that it does not contain proteins. It contains proteins might be, but in a lesser amount. Every food item contains all those things. In some food items, carbohydrates will be more. In some food items, fats will be more. In some food items, proteins are more. Which are more in percentage that you consider as. Got it? I hope you understood this. And this is very, very important. The above tests show the presence of components of food which are usually present. So, types of food we eat contain all the above mentioned. We contain food, carbohydrates, proteins and fats. But in some, carbohydrates will be more, in some the proteins will be more, in some fats will be more. It depends on that. Next, there is a table for you, table 2. Let me draw that table and explain you. They will ask you after this experiment, they are going to ask you whether what it contains. Okay, testing of food items. Testing of food items. In the table you will see. First is given a serial number, food, starch, proteins, present or absent, you have to write. Present or absent. Proteins, present or absent. Next is fats. Present or absent. The food items given to you, you have to test with the above experiments whether you contain what you contain in that food item. Components what you need, what you contain, whether starch, proteins or see. First one is rice. Second one is potato. Third one is milk. Fourth one is curd. Fifth one is egg. By testing starch, proteins and fats, we have to see what it becomes starch. If the rice contains starch, it becomes, if you add iodine solution to it, it becomes blue or black. Okay, if curd contains proteins, it turns into violet or purple. If they contain fats, the paper turns into, these are the food items which are going to be there. Rice. In rice, if you test the rice, presence of starch, you can say stickiness will be more. In potato also, you can see the stickiness, which says that it has starch in that. And so it turns blue, iodine solution to blue or black, dark blue or black. And in this, proteins and fats are very less in number, so you can say they are absent. In potato also the same. And milk also, proteins are more, means you need to add 2% of copper sulfate and 10% sodium hydroxide, so that you can test it. And curd and egg are also same. Presence of this will be more. In fats, in chips or anything, if you add in milk, fat is also present. Okay, but complete milk is a complete food which you get proteins and all the minerals and all from it. Milk is very good to it. And here are the questions. Some questions to you. And first, which food show presence of starch? Which food show presence of starch? Rice, potato, maize, all these things majorly show you the presence of starch. Which nutrients are present in milk? In milk, proteins are there more, isn't it? And next, which component of food could you identify in potatoes? In potatoes, in carbohydrates, you will be having more, and starch will be more in that food items. In milk, which food item contain more fat? Like contain more fats. Presence of curd. In curd and egg, fats will be more. And next, which food items contain more protein? Curd, egg, milk. Milk contains more proteins, you can say, among all these things. And why you can say whether it is more or, means you will get that color change in that. If you add the solution, you will get a dark color. If you have a less proteins, you will get a less violet color, okay, or purple color, lighter. If it is more you are going to get it. Next, growing children and adolescents need more. See, we require different quantities of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. See, and depending upon the age, in a small age you need more carbohydrates, you need proteins and all. In the middle age, you don't need the carbohydrates more, you need protein foods and you need mineral foods more. And when you are more old, your digestive system becomes very sensitive and can't digest this carbohydrates and all. So you need a little food. For infants also, you don't keep a rice, right? You keep a small, which are light-weighted food which can be digested. Depending upon the age, you need to take all this. See, these are very, very important, no teacher? When I become big also, I'll eat Cerelac only, teacher. Is that enough to you? No. Cerelac is not enough to you, it is enough to your infants, and you need to take all the proteins and food, and to depending upon your teeth and your digestive system, you are supposed to take these. Okay, older persons need not to take more carbohydrates, they need more proteins. Okay, and this is, so pulses. Growing children and adolescents need more proteins, contains like milk, meat, pulses, etc. We also need minute quantities of some other components like vitamins and minerals. So vitamins and minerals are also minute components you need. And what are those minute components? About rough edges and water we will learn in the next slide. Okay, thank you.